Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Toddlers and teenagers run along the same lines as far as their brains are developing so quickly,
Mhm.
and they're in that developmental stage of life where they're figuring out their boundaries again, right? They're figuring out
Okay.
where mom and dad's power stops and where their power can start. And as teens, they're really trying to push. And so one of the pushes could be like, mom made the food and I don't like it. Like, like it might not even be physiological; it could be
Yeah.
psychological. And
Mhm.
also, they're probably exposed to a lot more highly palatable ultra processed foods, which can kind of
Mhm.
dull our senses in a way where we
Yeah.
get used to that zip of flavor and dopamine, and then we're like, oh, vegetables are kind
Mhm.
of boring, right?
Yeah.
So the answer, Laura, is that exposure is golden
Okay.
and agency is golden. So
Mhm.
that those are the two things we want to give our teens when it comes to food. We need to get them exposed to foods at a lot of different stages. Sending your teens to the grocery store is brilliant.
Hello and welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom. I'm your host, Laura Ollinger, teen and parent well-being coach and founder of Positively Healthy Coaching. And today I'm so excited to introduce you to Katie Kimball of Raising Healthy Families. She helps change kids' relationship to food, both through work in the kitchen and helping parents of picky eaters. She's a former teacher, two-time TEDx speaker, which I'm really excited to hear about that, writer and mom of 4 kids, and creator of Kids Cook Real Food course, Teens Cook Real Food course, and some really cool virtual summer camps, and lots of blogs for kitchen stewardship. She's on a mission to connect families around healthy food, teach every child can cook, and instill all those important life skills. Love that word, life skills, so important. So, Katie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I have gotta work on reducing the words in that bio because I'm like the idea person, right? So I'm like,
Yeah,
let's do this,"
good.
and then my
Yeah.
bio just kept getting longer. So,
Yes. Well,
goals.
that's a good thing. Okay. That's a good problem to have, right? You have lots of experience, lots of ideas. I love
True.
the creativity in it. So tell us, like, how did you develop this passion around kids cooking and kids in the kitchen and kids and teenagers and developing these life skills?
Well, I mean, I was born with the heart of a teacher. That's what I went to school for, and then I only taught in a classroom 2 years before I went home to have my kids. I knew I couldn't do both well with my perfectionist tendencies. And then, having a baby is a wake-up call, I think, for a lot of moms. We're like,
Hmm.
"Oh my gosh, food matters.
Yeah.
What?"
Yeah.
So for me, that was my sort of beginning of my conversion to digging deeply into research on nutrition and food and quality and stuff like that. And so my teacher brain was always going, like, how can I help other moms not hit all the stumbling blocks I hit? How can I help them
Mhm.
not burn the biscuits, and figure out how to wade through this research that's constantly changing and so controversial. And
Mhm.
so that was the beginning of my life online, was actually helping the moms balance their budget, their nutrition, their time, and care for the environment. And I started hearing really similar stories from a lot of people in my community. They'd say, Katie, I really want to cook healthy, but my mom never taught me to cook. So I'm
Mhm.
like, too, it's not about cooking healthy. I don't even know how to cook at all. And so that was where I realized, like, gosh, if we aren't comfortable in the kitchen as the mom generation, we're certainly not teaching our kids.
Right.
And in 20, 25 years, the kids are going to be going, oh, phew, wish I could be healthy, but my mom never taught me to cook.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
for me, that just felt like a calling to step into that gap as a teacher and a mom. And like, how can I not only make healthy eating easier for moms, but also like the whole family unit as a
Yeah.
team and get kids into the kitchen? And then it's just as we talked about my bio, it's kind of full now. It's snowballed from there into this massive passion because it started out really practical. Like, wow, kids really need to know how to cook so that they can nourish themselves, so they can help around the house, yada, yada. But
Mhm.
the more I worked with thousands of families, the more I realized that the confidence, the resilience, the creativity, like I could go on listing words forever. There's so many benefits to cooking. And so now I'm like super cheerleader that this is
Okay.
like not only a life skill to teach, but the most important life skill.
Wow, I love it. And what a great time of year. Also, we're starting off January 2026 recording this podcast, and it's always a time for renewal. I'm not a big like resolutions or whatever because we all know those fail.
Right, right.
But it's more setting yourself up for success, setting an intention, kind of just getting comfortable with something that you're maybe not comfortable with, and kind of like more easing your way into that. So, let's start this off with how can we get the moms and the kids and the teens more comfortable with this idea? Like, where do we start with this topic?
Well, I spent the last 6 months putting together a massive new course. So it was 10 years ago this month that I released Kids Cook Real Food. So I've been teaching kids to cook for a long time. And it's so thrilling to me right now that I now get to move on to teens, which I thought, Laura, I gotta tell you, I thought it would be like, oh, I'm gonna kind of teach the same basic skills, but
Yeah.
up leveled a little bit and like cooler and edgier, right?
Yeah.
Turns out it's like 4 times as big.
Wow. Okay.
It's huge because I kept thinking, what would a young adult in his or her first apartment need to know?
Mhm. Mhm.
And and there was just more and more and more, and then it's like, "Oh, I gotta do grocery shopping and meal planning." So it's been a huge 6 months for me understanding, like, what a parent of a teen might need to do first,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so I think I always talk to my community about the gradual release of responsibility, that from the time they're born to the time they leave our house and a little bit further sometimes, we're consistently releasing a little bit more responsibility from our purview into theirs. And so when they're teens, that process really amps up. It's that hockey stick graph, where
Yeah.
we're like
Yeah.
really letting them do so much more. So how do we get them? Oh my gosh, how do we get them interested in being in the kitchen when they're a little surly and a little bristly? And I think the first step has got to be to figure out what is their motivation going to be. So
Okay.
what does your teen love? Are they in drama? Are they in band? Are they in academic, science geek? Are they into sports? And figuring out what is going to be the hook. So if they're into sports, then you got to talk about fueling your body. And
Mhm.
if you want to fuel your body well, what does that mean? And what kind of research can you do? And if you want to fuel your body well, you're gonna have to have skills in the kitchen because when you leave home, I'm not following. I'm not going with you, kiddo,
Yeah.
right? I'm not cooking your meals, and it's
Mhm.
really expensive to buy pre-made healthy food.
Yeah.
It just is. So if you're going to have not an infinite income, especially as a young person. So
Mhm.
like that would be the athletic bent. For a
Mhm.
science geek, you can totally like I'm kind of a science geek myself.
Mhm.
And so I love digging into the science of how food works, not only in our bodies, but how cooking works and why we get the
Yeah.
brown crispy bits and the difference
Mhm.
between like wet heat and dry heat. I totally science geek out in teens cook real food. But I think that's the parent's question is looking at your teen or a different, each one of them's different if you have multiple and
Mhm.
thinking what would be their own motivational hook and
Mhm.
figuring out how to have some conversations to attempt to toss the ball to them and
Mhm.
give them some ownership of their health and their cooking and see if we can like reel them in like we're fishing because it's
Yeah.
probably not going to work to be like, "Hey guys, what do you think? Should we like start learning to cook tomorrow?" I
Yeah.
just that
They
works great when they're 5,
Right, right.
not when they're 15.
Exactly. Yeah, all the eye rolls and the, "Mom, what are you talking about? Why that's weird. That's
Yes.
cringy," all the things, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, well, great. Okay, so just kind of like the idea of tapping into their strengths, kind of like hooking them in, getting the interest going. And so, what would be the next step? Like, is it, well, yeah, yeah, like where do we go from here? I don't even want to fill in any words. I want you to kind of like tell us, like, what's the next step?
Yeah. Well, it's so hard to answer because the hooks are all gonna be different, right? But
Hmm.
I mean, the next step for any parent, I know our brains are so full, our schedules are so full, and so there's always psychological roadblocks. So really, the first step is to get the teen somewhat interested, even if it's 1%, and the second
Hmm.
step is to get rid of your own roadblocks that this will be too hard, it's too big of a task, they're gonna be messy, you're gonna have to nag them, you know what I mean? Like, we just
Hmm.
need to figure out how to break this down into
Hmm.
something really small. So I would not say ask your teenager to make dinner. Like, some people do that,
Yeah.
and it's cute and it's sweet, but it's huge.
Hmm.
And so I would say, let's figure out one skill or one task or one piece of a meal that maybe you can try to pass on to them. And again, that what that piece is gonna kinda depend on their hook. I often say the best time to create a snowball effect of motivation is if a teen can cook for someone else outside their immediate family, because they
Hmm.
no longer care what you think as the parent, right? But get to receive authentic praise from other adults or peers is gold. So if
Mm,
you can find a time where maybe the grandparents are coming over, that's kind of soft one, maybe their
yeah.
friends are coming over, maybe you're going to a party or potluck and you need to take some food. Okay,
Hmm.
so if you can get your teen involved in that and then somehow let it be known that they were involved in it without being overt, like, "Oh, guess who made the food?" Like, that's what I tell
Right.
the parents of kids.
Hmm.
Not the same for teens. And they can see people, like, people who are eating don't have to say, "Oh, like, good job, Billy. We're so glad you made this meal."
Yeah.
They just enjoy it, like,
Right.
sighs of pleasure. And so for a teen to then see that, it's this immediate positive feedback loop,
Mhm.
and ideally would motivate them to hopefully come back and learn new skills. So you have to get over your own psychological roadblocks once you get their
Mhm.
motivating hook, and then figure out what's like one small task or one small recipe that they can learn to make, preferably to serve others.
Mhm.
And then this hopefully, ideally, right? Fingers
Yeah.
crossed, the snowball will begin.
Okay. Well, that's such a great idea, and I had never even would never have thought of that, like, the cooking for outside of the family or for guests or anybody to get, like you're saying, that praise and, like, that's that positive reinforcement and probably some dopamine pumping in the brain
Yep.
there and that excitement, and then that's that really just pride and that's that intrinsic motivation that then helps them wanna do it again or do it more and kinda get more into it. So, my next question is, how do you and I think it might depend on the kid, like you said, with the personalities, but how do you encourage the health part of it, like the health, and nutrition part of it?
Yeah, oh man, that's so important because I know, especially like if you are a mom for whom nutrition is important, you're probably in worry stage. If they're in high school, you're thinking, "Oh my goodness, like high schoolers eat horrible food and they're just going to leave home. They're going to forget what vegetables even look like when I'm not putting them on the table." It can be very stressful. And so I'm a huge fan. I work with a lot of parents of picky eaters, and I always tell them that the greatest gift we can give our kids is to teach them to listen to their bodies. And
Mm,
I was raised in the '80s and '90s. In some ways, we were taught to break our communication with our bodies, right? We were taught to eat beyond fullness, clean your plate. There are starving
mhm.
children in Africa, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
And
we've all had that.
and yet especially now, like, there's food everywhere. So we
Mm,
really are taught and trained not with verbal words, but by our environment. We're trained to eat when we see food instead of
mm,
eating when we're hungry. And so I
mhm.
think helping your teens to understand what their feelings of hunger and satiety feel like is huge. That really should start earlier, but if you have teens, it's never too late. But
Yeah.
also just to listen to how food makes their body feel. So that
Mm,
would be a
mhm,
question for your parenting toolbox is, how did that meal make you feel?
mm,
Open-ended, and just let them break it down if they're willing
mhm.
out loud, or even at least you've planted the seed by asking the question, because sometimes food makes us feel really heavy and
Yeah.
slow and clunky.
Mhm.
Sometimes food makes us feel energized. There are probably tons of teenagers, tons of adults walking around with undiagnosed food sensitivities
Right.
because we're not listening to
Mm,
really how this food makes our body feel. And so,
mhm,
what a great gift,
mhm,
right? If they
mhm.
can start to listen, even if they seem like they don't care as teens, they have that foundation and that question, your voice in their head consistently saying, "How did that food make you feel?" Or how do you want to eat for how you want to feel?" would be the pre-dinner question.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and at least when they're in their 20s, standing in the grocery store, maybe your voice will be in their head saying that.
Right, right. Wow, this is all such great stuff, and I love getting that mind-body connection going and, like, really feeling into that. So, next question is, and I'm thinking of my own kids where, they all have kind of different palates and
Mhm.
they go through these phases. And my kids are all pretty healthy. Like, they all love to work out, they're all in sports, but like,
Right.
let's just say one of them, or no, two of them, I would call like the pickier ones. And anytime I say what they say, what's for dinner, and I say this, they're like, ew, gross, or whatever. But the problem is, it's like, well, what do you want? And they never know what they want. They know what they don't want, which is basically everything.
Mhm.
But they don't know what they do want. And so it's funny because I actually just sent my two of my kids to the grocery. They're out of school still for the holiday break, and I just sent two of them to the grocery store. I'm like, here's my credit card. Go. We needed food. I'm like, go for it. So I'll be interested to see what they bring home, and I trust them, to a pretty strong extent. I'm sure there'll be some little treats in there for sure. But,
Mhm.
how do you address those picky eating kids? Because it's not just the little ones, like the toddlers and all that. It's funny because they were actually better as younger children, eating their broccoli, raw vegetables, all the thing. And now it's like there's something funny that happens when they're teenagers where it's not that they're anti-vegetable, it's just that they're just picky. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Toddlers and teenagers run along the same lines as far as their brains are developing so quickly,
Mhm.
and they're in that developmental stage of life where they're figuring out their boundaries. again, right? They're figuring out
Okay.
where mom and dad's power stops and where their power can start. And as teens, they're really trying to push. And so one of the pushes could be like, mom made the food and I don't like it. Like, like it might not even be physiological. It could be
Yeah.
psychological.
Mhm.
And also they're probably exposed to a lot more highly palatable ultra processed foods, which can kind of
Mhm.
dull our senses in a way where we
Yeah.
get used to that zip of flavor and dopamine. And then we're like, oh, vegetables are kind
Mhm.
of boring, right?
Yeah.
So the answer, Laura, is that exposure is golden
Okay.
and agency is golden. So
Mhm.
that those are the 2 things we wanna give our teens when it comes to food. We need to get them exposed to foods at a lot of different stages. Sending your teens to the grocery store is brilliant because they have to pick up that food and put it in the cart, and especially if it's produce, they're getting some actual, like, physical exposure with their skin. We want our teens to be washing food. "Oh, you don't like cauliflower? That's okay. Scrub this cauliflower, please."
Mm.
Doesn't matter. They don't have to eat it for the exposure to count. They can cut up the
Oh, okay.
cauliflower. Okay, so any exposure to a food, whether it's tactile, olfactory, through smelling or tasting, counts, and it can help
Mm.
them sort of become friends with that food, almost like an inoculation. So that's super
Mm.
golden, which just means pulling them to get them involved in the kitchen. And then
Mhm.
having some agency is huge. Obviously, it's what all our teens want. They want
Yeah.
choice, they want control of their environment. And
Mhm.
so let's say you figure out like, okay, I think my first step, my first thing that I want my teen to do in the kitchen is just be in charge of like a side vegetable. Right? I'm gonna make the main course, and we're just gonna say, "What should the side vegetable be?" Because first of all, we don't wanna give even our teens, like, complete wide, expansive choices. What do you want to eat? It's so common. Like you just said it, and it's our gut
Yeah.
reaction. It's our knee jerk, right? Like, "Oh,
Right.
you don't wanna eat what I made. What do you wanna eat?" But
Yeah.
that's, like, too big of a slate for them to choose from.
Mm.
So you can say, "Go check the freezer, see what frozen vegetables we have or fresh vegetables," wherever however your family structure is,
Mhm.
and I would love you to choose one for tomorrow's dinner or 2 or make a mixture, right? And
Mhm.
ideally, this is paired with some actual teaching. So, like, when I teach in Teens Cook Real Food, we teach how to sauté, sweat, roast,
Oh,
air fry. Like, we teach all these different methods for
okay.
making your vegetables. And
Mhm.
then we teach some lessons on flavor and how you can layer in the flavor, how you can, sniff all of your herbs and spices and see like what goes together. So I
Mhm.
just actually yesterday read a fantastic story from one of our 50 testing families because I'm crazy. I ran the course through 50 families. I have like
Wow.
2,700 pieces of feedback. Um, and she lives in Texas too. And she said, this was amazing. My picky teen chose some spices. And I want to say it was like turmeric, paprika, and cinnamon,
Hmm.
which is unique.
Yeah, very kind of Middle
And
Eastern almost.
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then the picky teen chose to use, like, his blend of spices on a chicken stir fry, I believe. And she was
Mm.
like, "I can't even believe it." Like, not only did we like it, even though it was a little unique, but he liked it and he ate it. And it's
Wow.
that control piece, I think,
Yeah.
where you're like,
Yeah.
"I have smelled the spices, I have made the choices, I have
Mhm.
added these to my food." You also get an inoculation, you're, like, smelling
Yeah.
while you're cooking. And what this actually does, which is a bummer for the adults, but it's great for picky eaters, is it dulls your senses a little bit.
Hmm.
So it's almost like you've been how when you go to a restaurant and, like, the first bites of food are just delectable, you're like, "I could eat this all night."
Yeah.
Thank goodness that feeling doesn't last all the way through, or we would all eat, like, we'd overeat way too much, right? So we
Mhm.
are designed that our senses get dulled as the meal goes on, as we're
Mm.
eating the same thing. And
Mhm.
so that kind of begins when you're the cook. Again, bummer for us. That's probably why
Yeah.
we love when other people cook for us so much,
Yeah.
but it's great for our preferenced eaters because they're already sort of going down that decline. And if they're,
Mhm.
especially if their senses are running a little high, which is often the case for picky eaters, they're like, they like, taste things like too vibrantly, and then
Mhm.
it can overkill their senses. So smelling it while they're cooking is
Mm.
starting that downward decline. They're
Okay.
also engaged, and so, as humans, we like to close our loops, we like to finish what we start, and so
Mhm.
all
Mhm.
of those things, while they're cooking, can put forth hope, I guess more hope
Yeah.
that then they
Yeah.
will eat and enjoy what they've made. It's almost like a magic potion. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't work every time, but I feel like we're like witches and wizards, like, putting all these little exposure and agency into the cauldron, like, stir it up,
Mhm.
and out comes a great eater.
Yeah, yeah. One of my other I'm going personal now on my real family because, I assume it applies to other people. I like to when I cook, big quantities of things, I'll always often put things either for leftovers for, the next day or 2 or in the freezer.
Yeah.
one of my children cannot stand it when something comes out of the freezer. They're like, "That's gross. It's been in there." And I'm like, "Why? It's the same thing we already ate before." But it just bothers her that it was previously frozen. Do you have any tips for that?
That is really interesting, and I love that your podcast is now a counseling session. This is
Yeah.
I do that as well with my guests. I'm like, "Let's just talk about my life."
Yeah.
Um, that's fascinating. I still think probably exposure and agency are the answers. So let's
Okay.
say she has cooked something,
Mhm.
and then you're like, "Oh, man, we're going on vacation and we can't finish these leftovers," or whatever. Like, if it's
Yeah.
something that she has some ownership and investment in, and then it
Mhm.
goes into the freezer and comes back out, I think that would be, like, one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Helping her understand, like, it's really not that different.
Right.
But I think sometimes as adults and as grown-ups, we see things from a very pragmatic level, like
Right.
food, it's the same food. But kids and teens are gonna interact with their world a little differently, so to give your daughter credit,
Mhm.
sometimes the texture really does change when
Mm.
things come out of the freezer. So I
Mhm.
think that's something to be really aware of, that she's not actually just, having a psychosis.
Yeah.
She's a normal human. And so that's where conversation about texture is key, and this is, again, for, like, all eating and all cooking. It's
Mhm.
fascinating to take, let's say, a head of broccoli or a stalk of asparagus, and if you sauté it in bacon grease versus if you steam it, versus if you steam it twice as long and it gets, you know what I mean, like,
Yeah,
oversteamed,
real
like, it's
mushy.
falling
Yeah.
apart, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you roast it.
Mhm.
Those are all incredibly different, like, sensory sensations in your mouth,
Mhm.
aren't they?
Mhm.
And so these are wonderful conversations and experiences for kids and teens to have, because then, if they say, "I don't like broccoli," it's an immediate like, "Oh, really? Like, what? Broccoli cooked how?" 'Cause
Mm.
now I don't like broccoli, there's like 12 different kinds of broccoli. So now
Yeah.
you need, as the teen, you need to prove your point that I've tried, all these different preparations and all these different seasonings and all these different sauces. So I think that's also what learning to cook can do, and, like, playing with things. We had actually a guest chef, which was so much fun. We spent a whole day at his cafe. So he taught, like, flavor, the role of acid and sauces and
Mhm.
herbs and spices and stuff. And so when you build that foundation of knowledge for your teens, now they're not gonna look at broccoli as broccoli. They're
Mhm.
gonna look at it as potential, and they have these, like, dozen different ways that they can make it theirs, and that's the ownership piece, which is so powerful.
Oh. I love that because it's such a coaching question. It's like for me, when I work with clients, it's usually like, nobody likes me. I don't have any friends. I'm so stressed out. I can't do this big assignment. It's like these big kind of
Yep.
catastrophic statements. They're very extreme. It's very black or white. And I'm like, really? Nobody likes you? Like, not even your best friend, not even your teacher, not even your mom, not even. And then they're like, oh, well, actually, no, that person. Oh, yeah. Oh, wait. And then all of a sudden, it's like we have 10 people that like, you know what I mean? And so it's
Yes.
like just taking these big statements and like what you're saying. I love that idea because then they have to kind of prove it. It's like, can you prove this in a court of law? No, I can't prove that. You know what I mean? So,
Right, you're dismantling their statement of truth.
yes. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I this is so great. The last part for me that still feels stuck is just I know as a mom I do, and I know I'm not the only one who the exhausted question is, "What are we gonna have?" Right? Like, that's the like, "What are we gonna have for dinner?" Right? And then there is this just kind of I enjoy cooking, but it's like the work to figure it out, that mental load, this going to the store and preparing, and then the cleanup. It's all the stuff that's not the fun stuff, it feels like.
Mhm.
If you just walked into a professional cooking set and everything's already pre-diced for you, yeah, that's for me. And then somebody's
So
cleaning up
fun.
after you and they've already decided, right? And so how do you just address that with families in general, like getting over those big humps?
I mean, family teams and shared responsibility can really lighten that mental
Mm.
load. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna paint a picture of the end game.
Okay.
Listeners, remember, don't compare your beginning or your middle to my end. But because I've been teaching my kids to cook for 10 years, I've got a 20-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 14-year-old who all make one meal a week completely independently.
That's
And
awesome.
so that only leaves me with 4. Like, reduced
Mm.
mental load, that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
So there is an investment of work on the front end,
Okay.
but the goal is that you don't have to do it all. It's
Mm.
so nice.
Mhm.
And we also have a strong rule in our family that if you cook, you don't have to clean up, regardless
Oh.
of whether you're the parent or the child. So no one who could everyone if you're the cook, man, your feet are up at the end of the meal,
Ah.
and the rest of the family cleans up.
Mhm.
And I think that's also instilling a heart of service in my kids, which is really important for me,
Mm.
that we're all
Yeah.
contributing to this meal. There's a cook, or maybe there's 2 cooks, and then everyone else is going to clean up and take that load from the cook. So that's anytime you can teach your kids a task, it feels like a little higher on your mental load at first, but the goal, just like investing money, is that there's an ROI, there's a lower mental load at the end.
Mhm.
Plus, it's so much better for them. Like, not only are we building future adults, right? Like, you and I, we both wanna launch our kids into the world, like, able
Mhm.
to fend for themselves and feed themselves. Of course, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But there's so many benefits too to the teens cooking now. We talk about mental health and reducing anxiety and increasing resilience. Like,
Mhm.
things are going to go wrong in the kitchen, and they're going to have to learn how to deal
Mm.
with, the pizza that slid off their tray into the bottom of the oven. True
Yeah.
story for my kids. What to do if you forgot to thaw the meat? What happens if you burn something? Pivot and figure out a new side dish. It's the kitchen is such a low pressure, generally low pressure, low key environment to make mistakes, mess up, and learn from failure, and that's what we want for our kids. I'm sure you do that in your coaching, like, how can we learn from failure? Like, this is the arena to practice.
I love it. That was the word I was gonna say, arena, 'cause, so many times you hear how sports is, like, the perfect way to, like, practice life and or games, and, like, how you play a game is how you do life and all the things, but I've never heard this concept, and so I'm excited about it. Like, the kitchen is this arena to,
Mm.
get just build these skills and develop these kind of emotional regulation, which is something I, work with kids a lot on, and parents as well. And so the last piece that is I found myself needing to do was that boundary of the cleaning up. So my kids are great. They will go cook themselves, breakfast or lunch. They'll go make whatever. But then I find they leave it out. It's just out. And so I had to challenge myself with, my son sitting comfortably on the couch watching a football game, and so it's like you don't wanna just walk in there and be like, "Hey, you didn't clean up," or, "Hey, you left a mess," right? Like that kind of like barky order controlling kind of behavior. And so I thought, "Okay, this is my challenge to how do I phrase this question so that it's effective, and empowering to him?" And so I can't remember my exact words, but it was something like, "Hey, how could I help you build the habit of remembering to clean up after yourself?"
Did it work?
He laughed. First of all, he laughed when I said it. And so he's just like, "Oh," like he knew, right? Like he knew. He's like he realized that he does have this habit of leaving the stuff out. And so it's funny because I know I'm like, I'm here to help. Like, how can I help you build the habit? Right. But in reality, I didn't need to help. All I needed to do was ask the question. And
Yes.
so I would love to kind of like throw the ball in your court, which is with all this experience you have. What have you learned as far as like using the language to empower and not push away or control or diminish or anything like that?
I think we need a really robust parenting toolbox because, your son left, which was awesome. He's like, "Oh, yeah, my mom, the coach, she's doing the thing." I
Right.
I have a teenager who would scowl in disgust at that exact phrase, probably.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful tool, right? It's
Yeah.
gonna work for some parent and child personality pairs. For me, I tend to use a little bit of a sarcastic humor as well. I'll say
Okay. Yeah.
things like, "Did you bring a tip for your waitress?" Or, "Did you bring a tip for your busser? I can clear that for you," and they're like,
Yeah.
"Ugh, mom,"
Yeah.
but they do it, and that's very much my personality coming through.
Okay.
I think also just the general comment, like, I see food is out, right? Just walk through the kitchen, I see there's some bread on the
Uh,
counter,
oh, yeah.
or the milk's gonna spoil. Whoever left it
Just the
out,
observational statement.
I hope
Yeah.
it goes away. Yeah,
Yeah.
where it's not a nag, it's not even really personal, it's just a
Yeah.
true fact. This is
Yeah.
what I see. And I do like to talk too a lot about that family team. Like, "Listen, I can do
Mm.
this,
Hmm.
and you can do this, and we can all do this, but if I'm doing all of it, it's going to end up causing some downstream problems in the family. I'm probably gonna be crankier tonight. We won't have time to watch Stranger Things together." You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's the basic, like, cause and effect that really we use from the time they're 1 and up, just shifted to a little bit more, like, critical thinking style, I guess, for
Mm.
teens, and we definitely have some structure. We have some expectations where everybody eats everybody cleans, we'll say phrases like that. And so I think part of it is building a family culture
Mhm.
that we do clean up after ourselves. Believe me, Laura, this is not perfect. My house is constantly a mess. We're
Yeah,
constantly rebuilding the family culture,
right.
but it just gives you sort of some phrases that you can say then, like,
Yeah,
"Oh, whoever made the mess, please clean it up," kind of thing.
right.
And if that's something common, it doesn't feel as naggy as long as you don't let that one tone into
Right.
your voice, which I'm still working on
Yeah,
eradicating
tonality is
fully.
so important. Yes, yes. Well, a lot of and I can hear kind of the teacher in you too, so this is, like, so fantastic because I know lots of moms who they don't wanna burden their children, right? Like, they're and that's it's true, like, our teenagers they're tired, they've had sports, they've had school, they still have homework, and they're, on a school night type of thing. Don't wanna be like, "Oh, and by the way, here's one more thing for you to do," right? But I love the idea of just that this has been A, instilled at a young age, but B, it's not too late, right? And kind of like to start these conversations again, great time of year if you're listening to this currently, or if you're somewhere in the future listening to this episode, it's never too late, right? Because of the skills you're teaching, not just like kind of those life skills, but also that like you went back to that emotional resilience, that like mental health and well-being, as far as like we're a family, we're a team, and moms are notoriously kind of stressed out, burned out, and that we all need to like lift this load together of like being a family and living together, and that it's setting them up for success for their future living and things like that. So, Katie, just any last thoughts that we didn't touch on that you feel like is important for the moms to listen to today?
Well, I love that you just said future living because I was just thinking, oh, we talked about the tool of humor and the tool of observation and the tool of family culture and team responsibilities, but I forgot the tool of future casting. And
Okay.
I think especially once your teen is 16 and up, they got their driver, they're starting to look toward leaving home.
Mm-hmm.
And we can encourage that. I think that's a good thing because they really do, like, developmentally, they need to start to break from us, and it can be aggravating and difficult and painful because sometimes they do that in really painful ways. But
Mm-hmm.
as long as they understand that, like, we're okay with them leaving and make that a topic of conversation. You know, when you're off on your own, I'll actually tease my kids. I'll say, "Oh, when you have your own house, I am gonna come over and get the milk down to the last tablespoon and put it back in your fridge, and I'm gonna laugh so hard." Okay, so
Yes.
humor. I know I'm so sarcastic, but
I
also
love it. I love it.
you could say, "Gosh, when you're off on your own, I really want you to have a lot of skills. So let's think about that. Like, I want you to imagine if this was your house, take a look around. What would you need to do?"
Mm,
Right? If when
yeah.
you're an adult, what will you need to do? And,
Mm-hmm.
I've actually been having fun lately. I've been collecting all the times I said that in the course. When you're a young adult in your first apartment, you might. Or, when you have your own paychecks, they're not going to be infinite. Like, I took great pride, I guess, and joy in telling these teens, like, "Let's think about that. Let's think about being in a college dorm or being in your first apartment," because I kind of want them to imagine
Mm-hmm.
so that they prepare well.
Right, right. That's definitely something I've, coached a lot of clients going off to college, and they just had this, like, big sense of overwhelm or anxiety, and so I literally do exactly what you're saying, but just in more of a life way, breaking it down into, "Okay, let's come up with a packing list. Okay, let's look at" like, I had a client, like, Google what their dorm room, the layout was gonna be like, so they could plan for that because they didn't remember where the walls were and how the roommate was gonna be and all this stuff. So it's like anytime you can break it down and to have them visualizing, imagining, imagine your best day at college. What's that going to be like? Imagine your worst day at college and you need some support or you need some help or you need some self care. What's that going to be like? So that way, when they are having a rough day, they're like, oh, yeah, I remember I talked with Coach Laura about this. And so that way they're more prepared. So I love like you're doing this in such a like a very concentrated way, which is so like as we all know, a pillar of health is the way we eat and how we fuel our bodies and just those healthy habits that are a lifetime skill. So Katie, this has been amazing. Like I feel so excited about what you're doing. This is awesome. So how can people find you?
Please go to raisinghealthyfamilies.com
Okay.
positively healthy mom. So that's a special link just for podcast listeners, and it's going to take you to the best parts of teens cook real food. So if it's closed, you can get on the wait list, you can get some freebies, and if it's open, get the good stuff, you get to join. But I'm really thrilled to just share this with the world. So raisinghealthyfamilies.com positively healthy mom.
Perfect. And I'll make sure that link is everywhere in all the show notes and everything. So Katie, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation and I'm excited about what you're doing. This is awesome.
Thank you, Laura. Now you have to text me about how the grocery trip went, okay?
Oh, I will. I'll let you know what came home that was very intelligent or maybe a not as wise decision. But yes, I'll let you know.
So good.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.